Hello, in this video I will be restructuring Flux into a 10-episode format akin to series 11 and 12. 3 points I want to make before I get into this. First point, I'm going to assume you watched Flux before you started this video. I'm not going to explain what every episode did, I will just explain some of the points that are needed and assume you know the rest. Point 2. Before Flux was written, I don't know who was cast as the writers and I don't know what the plots would have been. I assume that the New Year special, Eve of the Daleks, would have been the New Year special anyway, and potentially the Doctor would have regenerated in that. Flux was then converted into an 8-part special during COVID, and quite late on, the BBC asked Chibnall to do some 2022 specials, at which point I'm going to assume that the planned New Year special from the original plan of 10 episodes, Eve of the Daleks, was split into 2 parts, the New Year special and the regeneration special at the end of 2022, and potentially a lost plot from Flux or something is going to be used for the Easter special, I don't know. These are all unknowable variables. I'm going to assume that episode 1 to 6 of Flux is going to be the entire 10 episodes. And 3, the structure will not be the same. This is a serialised format and is very, very different from an episodic format. The order will change, some characters will do different things, and the cliffhangers will not be as they originally were. So if things happen differently in my version, that is intended. It is not the same as a serialised format. So be prepared for differences. On we go. Firstly, I'm going to go through what happened in each episode, breaking down the storylines contained within. Episode 1, The Halloween Apocalypse, introduces Dan and Diane's relationship. It introduces the relationship of Carvanista. We start to meet Swarm and Azure. We meet Claire, we meet Vinda, and we learn about the Williamson tunnels, which become useful in the finale. War of Sontarans is split into 3 distinct plots: the Crimean War with the Sontarans, present-day Liverpool with Sontarans, and the Siege of Atropos on the planet Time. There are also some scenes of the Williamson tunnels. In Once Upon a Time, we learn about Dan's history with Diane, perhaps in a dreamed story that didn't actually happen, we're not sure. We learn about Yaz and her story with the Weeping Angel, although it is pretty much confirmed that that is not a real storyline. We learn about Belle, we learn about Vinda, and we learn about Ruth's Doctor's past with Swarm and Azure. In Village of the Angels, we get Claire, we get Jericho, we get Peggy, and we get a little bit more on Belle's story. Survivors of the Flux, we get the story of Prentice, who appeared in Vinda's story in Once Upon a Time. We learn what the Williamson tunnels were for. We learn about Yaz, Dan and Jericho in the past, how they reach present day, and we have the Doctor's story with the Division. We also get a little bit more of Belle's story and Carvanista's story in that as well as Vinda's story, and we learn where Diane is. The Vanquishers has pretty much every story that we have so far set up. It has Unit, it has Prentice / the Grand Serpent, Claire, Jericho, Sontarans, Belle, Vinda, Diane, Carvanista, the Division, and Swarm and Azure, and also the Ood story. This covers everything that has previously happened in the series. Now, I'm going to break down how I would restructure this information. So here are my 10 episodes of Flux. Episode 1 is the Halloween Apocalypse. This is going to be more of a character introduction to Dan, so the flashback that we saw in Once Upon a Time is going to become part of the plot. We're going to see him dating Diane a little bit more. We're not going to have Vinda in this, we're not going to have the Williamson tunnels, it's simply Dan's story, although Carvanista is still involved and we're still going to have the Flux involved. We can have Swarm involved potentially, but I don't think it's needed at this stage. Episode 2 is going to be Village of the Angels. This is controversial, but I've got a reason for it, because the ending of the series is going to happen in a different order, so I want to get Village of the Angels out at the start. This is going to be the scenes from Once Upon a Time with the angel inside Yaz's phone, and the angel tormenting Yaz, but rather than that being a metaphorical sequence in Atropos, it's going to actually happen. If we wanted to have the angels let in by the disturbance of the Flux hitting the TARDIS in the Halloween Apocalypse, that can be done, but as this is episodic, we don't have to have the cliffhangers the way they did, so we can purely just lead into the angels if we want to. Claire getting taken by the angel is going to be the pre-title sequence. This is going to be the first half of the episode with the angel tracking down Yaz. The Angel is then going to get into the TARDIS, and then we carry on as normal from that point. However, the part where Yaz gets taken by the Angel in the Village of the Angels is going to be the ending to part 1. That means that Jericho isn't introduced at that stage, and so he isn't going to be in the past with Yaz. It's simply going to be Yaz and Dan in the past. That's where we cut off. Episode 3 is Village of the Angels Part 2. We're going to have 3 stories going on at once. We're going to have the Doctor and Jericho and Claire happening as it always did. We're still going to have the pieces about the division, that's fine. The Doctor is going to be doing her part while Yaz and Dan are in the past, as they were, but Yaz and Dan are an episode ahead. They're trying to figure out where the Williamson tunnels are. We're also going to have the story of the Williamson tunnels that is told through the series, all done in one piece, so you get 3 stories going on at once, sort of a Once Upon a Time style. When the Doctor gets taken by the Angels, she's simply going to go back in time, probably to the same point in time that Yaz and Dan were, and she's going to find a way to get to the Williamson tunnels also. It depends on how you want it. They could go to the present day again and find the TARDIS in unit as they originally did, or they could just go back to the Cursed Village at the original point and find the TARDIS where they originally left it. It doesn't matter either way, they find the TARDIS. This does mean that Jericho is not going to be the companion for the series. Because we've done it so early on, we can't have him there for the whole series, and to be honest, I don't think it'll make a huge amount of difference. We just leave him with Claire. If we want to, we can take Claire back to the present at this point, or we can do that in the finale. Episode 4 is War of the Sontarans. I've moved it to this point because I wanted to mirror the Arachnids in the UK idea of the modern day Earth story in episode 4. This is going to carry on exactly how it did. The Doctor is going to be in the Crimean War, and Dan is going to be in present day Liverpool. Yaz can be at home in Sheffield, or she can be off in her own story, or she can be doing Dan's story or the Doctor's story. It doesn't matter. The story continues on exactly as it did. The only real difference is that the story where Diane gets taken by Azure in Halloween Apocalypse is going to happen at the end of this. Episode 5 is Vinder's story, or as I'm going to call it, Outpost Rose. This is going to be the story of Vinder, but told in the correct order, from the Grand Serpent in Once Upon a Time, right the way through to getting put on Outpost Rose, and then evacuating Outpost Rose and looking for Bel. It's going to be Vinder's story from start to the point where he gets absorbed by the passenger form in Survivors at the Flux. We're going to set up what the passenger form is, and we're going to set up the Grand Serpent story, but those aren't going to be continued until the following week. If we wanted to, we could have some bits of the Doctor there, but this is essentially a Doctor Light tale. Episode 6 is Once Upon a Time. However, this is not going to be the Once Upon a Time that we know. It's going to be Once Upon a Time with the story of Swarm. He is going to get released from the prison of the Division, and that's your pre-title sequence. We're then going to see him doing the whole Outpost storyline that we had in War of the Sontarans. We don't have Vinder at this stage because he's already off on his own story, but perhaps Vinder could be replaced by Dan. It could be Yaz and Dan's story. That's absolutely fine. At the same point that the Doctor jumped into the time streams and talked to the Mori, that's also going to happen, but she's just saving Dan and Yaz instead of Dan and Vinder. The flashback stories are only going to be about Ruth and the Division, and that's going to explain how Vinder got taken by the passenger form in the previous episode. This episode is still going to end with the flashback to Tectayun. That all happens. It's essentially just all the pieces involving Atropos and Swarm happening in a single episode. If you like, think of it as Fugitive of the Dragoon for Series 13. That's all it is. Episode 7 is BEL'S story. This starts as Once Upon a Time started with BEL, but it's going to be all of her pieces from Once Upon a Time, Village of the Angels, and Survivors of the Flux all happening at once. Think of it as a Love and Monsters. She has become Elton. It's the story of Series 13 told from start to end, but from BEL'S view. This is going to run all the way to the point where the Sontarans invade her ship. We're still going to have the reveal that she's the one Vinder's looking for. All of her story remains, it's just that it's going to happen at the end rather than concurrently through the series. So it's like the whole series in one episode if you like. Episode 8 is going to be the Grand Serpent invading Unit. This story needs to be separate from Vinder's story because this needs to happen at the finale for him to let the Sontarans in for the ending. However, we can extend it out a bit because I realise there's not enough footage for this. We can just go deeper into the story unit, explain more about how he got there, explain more about what his plan is. It's just the same story as Survivors of the Flux with the Grand Serpent, but a little bit more elaboration. Episode 9 is Survivors of the Flux. This is where some of the changes start to take hold. We're going to have the Doctor, rather than being taken to the division, she's going to try and track the memory that she had of Tectayun from once upon a time, and she's going to track that down to the division headquarters. This episode is going to be all the pieces of the division, essentially its companion light, and it's going to run all the way up to the point where she gets split into 3. However, what is going to happen here is that she is going to instruct the Ood what to do, as she did in the Vanquishers, but do that an episode early. This is sort of going to be a twist in the finale, that she's instructed the Ood to betray Tectayun. However, when she takes off the badge, rather than getting split into 3, she's simply going to go back to the TARDIS, and Swarm is going to invade at that point and still kill Tectayun. It's just that the Doctor has already left at that stage. This episode will end with the Sontarans invading, as they did in the unit story episode 8, and the cliffhanger is going to be that the Sontarans are going to take over, just as they did, but the Doctor has left the division already. Episode 10, The Vanquishers. This is purely going to be the Sontarans plot. We're not going to do the bits with the division, we're not going to do the bits with Swarm. We're still going to have the bit with the Chameleon Arch with Swarm, but that's going to be done telepathically, as it was done in the Halloween Apocalypse, rather than being done in person. We're going to cut out the bit with Jericho and Claire doing the psychic work with the Sontarans, because they didn't come back from Village of the Angels. However, I understand that if we want to keep Jericho's ending intact and have him killed by the Flux, we can use the TARDIS, just as we did to pick up Claire, and pick up Jericho in the process and bring him back in, that's fine, but I personally wouldn't do that. The pieces where Jericho is removed, and the pieces where the Ood storyline has already happened in the previous week, they're just going to be filled out by having all the stories run one after the other, rather than having 3 run at the same time. That will give us more space to have the stories happen one after another, rather than doing it all at once. We're still going to have Diane escape the passenger form, we're still going to have Carvanista and the Grand Serpent, all that remains. At the ending, the Doctor is still going to go to Atropos, but she's going to go there just to check that the planet survived. Potentially she might be drawn there by Swarm, who knows. So the ending is going to still arrive at the planet Time and have the prophecy from Time. So the finale is essentially going to remain the exact same plot, it's just there's less plots being resolved, that's all that happens. So that is my 10 episodes of Flux. Let me know what you think in the comments, if you like my ideas, if I've missed anything you think is important, or if you would do it in a different way. Let me know all that in the comments.